This is my distance learning and virtual classrooms presentation. For this project, I decided to have my students do poetry. They had to choose which type of poetry they would like to teach another class. Since we're learning throughout the month of April figurative language and poetry, I figured this would be a perfect fit for them. I wanted to give them this experience of having them teach another class about what they have been learning, and I thought that Google Hangouts would be a great fit for that. This is how the lesson went. My students learned various types of poetry and they wrote them in their poem. They wrote their poems in their poetry books. They illustrated them. Then when we were getting ready to give this lesson, the students voted on the type of poetry they wanted to teach the other class. So they decided to do onomatopoeia. They thought it would be fun. So they created 4 groups because they figured that there were 4 sections that they needed to concentrate on. So they went on to their groups and they were in charge of that one component of the lesson. So each of them, without me prompting them, they created their own scripts because they thought that that would help with the lesson. So the first group developed an introduction to the poetry lesson and introduced the concept of onomatopoeia. The second group introduced the structure of the poem they wanted to teach, and they gave them examples of the poems they had already created. The third group wrote the poems with Jeff's class, and this group even created a worksheet so the other class could follow along as they were trying to create this poem. The last group created a closing for the lesson, so they were excited about trying to figure out what kinds of questions they had to ask so they knew that Jeff's class was able to understand them. We video conferenced them with them using Google Hangouts, and then all the students were very excited and they were very professional. They did their lesson, they implemented their lesson, and it went very well. Each student had a turn to speak, and they all felt like teachers. They had a great time. This is a copy of their scripts. I thought it was very cute how everyone introduced themselves, and some parts they spoke together. They gave a couple of examples of what they had been learning, and they made sure that they had questions for Jeff's class throughout their lessons. And they just wrote these and thought to make sure that each one of them had a line, or had 2 lines actually. They introduced themselves and they had something to say. So they themselves did that. This is some of their examples of their work. They created, and in the easel, they created uh, what they wanted the other class to see. So this is the first group. They wanted them to know about onomatopoeia and what it was. The second group wrote on the easel an example of their poem. And then the third group, they created a worksheet to go along with it. So they were very excited to use a computer, to use Google Drive and documents and create this so I can email it to Jeff's class. And together they created this poem in the classroom, and they just collaboratively did this, and they had a great time. And the last group, I don't have anything because they asked all those questions. And then my students had a great time also with Jeff's class because Jeff called them again in Google Hangouts, and they were interviewed by his class. So the students had the opportunity to answer the questions, and it was a great exchange. Everyone was very excited about this, and they keep asking me if we could do this again. So my experience, I thought that collaborating with another classroom was enriching for my students. They loved it. It was good. It was a good idea to have a meet and greet first. I didn't realize how excited my students were going to be. That first meeting was extremely energetic. My students really wanted to introduce themselves and ask so many questions to the other class. So it was a great first experience just to see how things were going to work if technology was going to be on our side, and things like that. So that first meeting was very important. Some of the problems I'd faced was that I didn't have the ability to see Jeff's class on the smartboard. My computer is not connected to the smartboard, so I was only able to see his class through my computer. So I solved that problem by going to Best Buys and buying an Apple TV. And my tech department was great. They were amazing. They actually came and plugged it in for me within a few days. So by the time my class was ready to do their lesson, my Apple TV was working. So they were able to finally see them on the board, and that made it much more enriching. So throughout this whole process, I've learned that technology can enrich my lessons, and I was um, being able to do Google Hangouts with another class, even if it's only 20 miles away. It was really accelerating for my class. They just found it amazing. So I look forward to doing this again.